Lovely viewers, Song Haikyo broke her silence on the ladies' man rumors surrounding Lee Min-ho, and what she said was not what anyone was expecting. Not a defensive statement. Not the carefully worded, professionally managed, diplomatically appropriate response of a famous wife addressing unflattering speculation about a famous husband in the specific, controlled form that public relations situations of this kind typically require from the people at the center of them. Not a denial in the conventional sense of the word. Something entirely different. Something that arrived from a completely different place than any professional framework for responding to rumors about a partner was designed to produce. She spoke about it with the specific, direct, entirely personal quality of someone who is not managing the narrative of a public relations situation but simply, honestly, from the most genuine interior of her actual experience of the actual man the rumors are about, saying what she knows to be true from the most primary and the most credible position available to any person in the world for saying it. She is that person. The one who knows him from the inside of the private world. The one who has been present for all the seasons of the marriage in the specific, continuous, deeply personal form of genuine shared life. And what she said from that position about the ladies' man rumors was the most direct and the most quietly devastating response to a narrative about a famous marriage that has been offered by anyone from the inside of that marriage at any point in the history of the minho story. Lovely viewers, ladies' man rumors. This is not a new category of public speculation about Lee Min-ho, and it is not surprising that such speculation exists in the specific cultural context of a man at his level of physical presence and professional charisma and sustained cultural prominence in one of the world's most image-conscious entertainment industries. Lee Min-ho is, by any measure available to the industry and to the broader cultural landscape in which his career has operated for 20 years, one of the most visually compelling and the most personally magnetic public figures in Korean entertainment. This is documented. It is not fan projection or subjective assessment. It is the industry's own assessment, reflected in the sustained, global, multi-demographic quality of the attention his career has generated across its full arc. The ladies' man narrative around him is not a new invention, and it is not without the general category of basis that such narratives always have when they attach to men at his level of physical presence and professional prominence. Song Haikyo knows this, has always known this, has navigated the specific, privately complicated experience of being married to a man who generates this category of public attention with the specific quality of informed, eyes open, entirely realistic understanding of someone who entered the marriage with full awareness of what the marriage to this specific person in this specific cultural context was going to require of her in terms of the specific, private management of her own interior in relation to the public dimension of his attention, generating presence. She knows all of this, and she spoke about it, directly, from the interior, without professional shaping. And what she said was more honest and more primary and more quietly certain than any managed response to a public relations situation involving rumors about a partner has any business being. Like this video right now. Subscribe to this channel and turn on every notification because what Song Haikyo said about Lee Min-ho and the ladies' man rumors is going to settle into the minho community and the broader internet in ways that reward continuous, contextually informed attention. Stay with me. The context in which Song Haikyo broke her silence on the rumors matters before any word of what she said can be properly received, because the context is what distinguishes her response from the managed, professionally appropriate response that the professional situation would typically require, and what makes it instead the specific, primary, deeply personal testimony of someone speaking from the most interior available position about the most interior available subject. She was not responding to a journalist's direct question in a formal interview context where the question had been anticipated and the response had been prepared, and the professional management of the narrative of the marriage was fully operational. She was in a conversation. The specific, comfortable, slightly less managed kind that occurs in the contexts adjacent to formal professional occasions, where the professional surface is present but operating at its softer version rather than its fully comprehensive formal interview version. Someone who was present in the conversation mentioned the rumors. Not as a direct question. as the kind of offhand reference to a well-known piece of public speculation that occurs in conversations between people who know each other well enough that the offhand reference to a publicly known thing is simply part of the ordinary conversational texture of the interaction, rather than a formal inquiry requiring a formal response. The mention happened, and Song Haikyo responded, not in the formal response mode, in the conversational mode, in the specific, comfortable, slightly less managed mode of the conversational context that gave the honest interior more room to speak than the fully formal professional context would have permitted. And what the honest interior said was what the honest interior of the person who knows Lee Minho from the most interior available position said when given adequate conversational space to simply, directly, entirely genuinely say it. She laughed first. This is the detail that arrived in the account before any word of what she said, and it is the detail that the most attentive minho analysts have correctly identified as the most significant single piece of evidence in the entire account of Song Haikyo breaking her silence on the ladies' man rumors. Not the diplomatic laugh of someone managing an uncomfortable topic with the gracious, socially sophisticated deflection that the professional surface of Song Haikyo's public life has always deployed with considerable skill when the topic requires it. The private laugh. The specific, genuine, entirely unmanaged laugh that the minho fandom has always identified as the laugh that comes from the interior rather than from any professional calculation about the appropriate response to the conversational moment. She laughed the private laugh at the mention of the ladies' man rumors about Lee Minho, before any word had been said in response to the mention. Simply, immediately, entirely genuinely laughed. And the laugh, arriving before any professional surface management of the response had been engaged, told the people in the conversation everything they needed to know about Song Haikyo's actual, interior, deeply personal relationship to the ladies' man rumors about the man she has been living with in the private world of the most private marriage in Korean entertainment across all the ordinary seasons of its existence. She laughed. Because from the position of someone who knows Lee Minho from the inside of the domestic world, the ladies' man narrative about him has the specific quality of something that is real in the external dimension of the public cultural assessment of a man at his level of professional charisma and physical presence and sustained cultural prominence, and that is simply, completely, and without any remainder, beside the point in the interior dimension of what that man is actually like in the private world of the genuinely shared life that she has been living with him. She laughed the private laugh at the beside-the-point quality of the ladies' man narrative from the position of someone who knows the full interior of the man the narrative is about. And the room, receiving a laugh before the words, understood that what was coming next was going to be the most honest thing that has ever been said publicly from the interior of the minho marriage about any external narrative about the marriage. Then she said the thing. The specific, direct, entirely genuine thing that Song Haikyo said when the private laugh had concluded and the conversational space allowed for the specific, honest, deeply personal response that the honest interior required to be given. She said that she knows who he is when nobody is watching. These 8 words. From the most credible and the most primary and the most entirely interior source available for saying them about the specific man they are being said about. She knows who he is when nobody is watching. Not who the industry knows he is. Not who the public knows he is. Not who the cultural assessment of his professional charisma and physical presence and sustained global attention knows he is. Who he is when nobody is watching. In the domestic interior. In the ordinary mornings. In the family walks and the quiet evenings and the handmade things and the quiet evening calls, and all the most interior and the most genuinely real dimensions of the private life that only the person who shares the domestic interior with another person across enough ordinary seasons of the shared life to simply, entirely, and without any remainder know them from the inside knows. She knows that version. She knows the version that exists when the professional surface is absent and the cameras are not running and no external audience is constituting any dimension of the behavior being produced. She knows the version that gets down to eye level. That waits without pressure. That makes breakfast in the ordinary morning. That holds the children's hands because the hands are there. That carries the handmade gift to the Dragon Festival. That calls on the quiet evening. That made her breathe differently from the beginning. That her mother prays, she knows how rare he is. She knows that version. And that version, she said, is not the ladies' man narrative. is so far from the ladies' man narrative that the ladies' man narrative, from the position of knowing the full interior, is simply, completely, and entirely beside the point. Dear viewers, the room went quiet. She continued, because the honest interior, given the conversational space of the slightly less managed context, had more to say than simply the 8 words about knowing who he is when nobody is watching. She talked about the specific quality of the man in the private world. Not defensively. Not in the form of a rebuttal to the rumors or a correction of the public narrative or any of the professional forms of response to unflattering speculation about a partner that the industry's public relations vocabulary has developed adequate frameworks for. Simply, directly, entirely personally, in the specific, conversational, entirely honest form of someone describing what they know from the most primary available position. She said that the man the rumors describe is a character. Not a lie in the sense of deliberate deception or fabricated narrative. A character. In the specific, entirely accurate sense of a public persona that is constructed from genuinely existing qualities, the physical presence and the professional charisma and the sustained cultural prominence, in the external projection of those qualities rather than in their private operation. The ladies' man character exists in the external projection. It is constructed from real materials. But it is not the interior of the person those materials belong to. And the interior of the person those materials belong to is what she knows. From the most primary position available, in the domestic interior, every ordinary day. And the interior, she said, is the man who is most at home when he is home. Who is most himself when he is in the shared domestic world with the family. Who brings to the private life the specific, quiet, entirely genuine quality of presence and attentiveness, and the particular, deeply personal form of care that the mother described and the father witnessed and the closest friend saw from the doorway, and the inner circle accounts have consistently identified as the most defining and the most genuinely significant feature of who Lee Min-ho is in the interior of his most important relationships. That is the interior. She knows it. From the most primary position. And the interior, she said, is not the character. The account of what Song Haikyo said about the ladies' man rumors contains one additional detail that the people who received the testimony have brought to the minho community with the specific, careful, deeply personal quality of people carrying something they understand is precious, and that deserves the full weight of its context to be properly received. After everything she had said, after the private laugh and the 8 words about knowing who he is when nobody is watching and the distinction between the character of the external projection and the interior of the actual person, she said something about herself. Not about him. About herself. About what it is like to be the person who knows the interior of that specific man from the most primary position and who therefore navigates the public ladies' man narrative about that man from the position of someone who knows the full truth of the interior. She said that knowing the interior makes the external narrative simply irrelevant in the specific, entirely personal sense of something that occupies a different dimension from the dimension where the actual life is lived. The external narrative exists in the dimension of public cultural assessment. The actual life is lived in the domestic interior. And the domestic interior is so specific and so genuinely real and so completely and entirely inhabited by the actual person rather than by the external projection of the qualities that constitute the public character that the ladies' man narrative, from the position of the domestic interior, is simply not in the same conversation. Not because she is naive or uninformed or operating from a position of willful ignorance of the public narrative. Because she knows, from the inside, what the inside actually is. And the inside, she said, is someone who would rather be home, who is most himself in the domestic interior with the family, who brings to the private life a quality of presence and attentiveness and genuine, continuous care that is so specific and so entirely directed toward the people in the private world that the ladies' man narrative, with its implication of diffusely distributed charismatic attention, is simply a description of a different person entirely from the person she lives with. She smiled when she said this. The private smile. The one that belongs to the domestic interior rather than to any professional surface. And the room, receiving the private smile at the end of the most honest public statement about the interior of the minho marriage that Song Haikyo has ever offered to any public context, was entirely and permanently moved. The response to Song Haikyo breaking her silence on the ladies' man rumors moved through the minho community with a specific, warm, deeply personal quality of momentum that the most genuinely real and the most entirely primary pieces of minho evidence have always produced. The community received the account of the private laugh and the 8 words and the character versus interior distinction and the private smile at the end. And the receiving produced the specific, layered, quietly overwhelming response of a community that has just been given the most direct and the most entirely genuine piece of interior testimony about the specific quality of who Lee Min-ho actually is in the private world of the most private marriage in Korean entertainment that any source with primary access to that interior has ever offered to the watching world. Not the spectacular response of a dramatic revelation. The warm, settled, deeply personal response of a community encountering the most honest and the most quietly certain thing that has ever been said from the inside of the story it has been watching from the outside for years. She knows who he is when nobody is watching. And what she knows is so specific and so completely real and so entirely at variance with the external narrative that the external narrative, from her position of primary interior knowledge, is simply beside the point. The hashtag was immediate.
She knows, it said.
And the internet, reading those 2 words in the context of everything Song Haikyo had said and everything the minho story has been building toward across every season of its mostly private existence, understood immediately and completely and without any analytical apparatus that the 2 words contain everything. She knows. The interior. The private version. The one that gets down to eye level and waits without pressure and makes breakfast in the ordinary morning and would rather be home. She knows that version, from the most primary position, and the knowing from that position makes the external narrative simply irrelevant from the interior dimension where the actual life is lived. On the morning after the account of Song Haikyo's silence breaking reached the community, someone from the inner circle described the domestic detail that has settled as the quietest and the most personally significant coda to the most direct and the most genuinely primary response to public rumors about the most private marriage in Korean entertainment. Lee Min-ho was home. In the ordinary morning. In the domestic interior of the shared home. Making breakfast. In the specific, ordinary, entirely unglamorous, and entirely real form of the man who is most himself when he is in the domestic interior with the family. Not the ladies' man character. The man who makes breakfast in the ordinary morning. That man. Simply and entirely, and without any remainder, home. Where he would rather be. Where he always comes back to. Where the private version lives. The one she knows. From the most primary position. Every ordinary morning. Simply, completely, irreversibly home. Disclaimer. This video is created for entertainment purposes. The story is based on fan discussions, online speculation, and unconfirmed reports. It should not be taken as verified fact. Please wait for official announcements from the actors, their agencies, or the production team before treating any rumors as confirmed.